Welcome and thank you for joining us at Celebrate Story. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If it's not your first time listening, welcome back. A couple notes for today's podcast. The first is a note for this podcast and for others that you may have heard in the past. We record this podcast in our master bedroom inside of our house, which houses 8 kids and a dog and neighbors and so on and so forth. So at any given time, you may hear in the background kids yelling, screaming, laughing, knocking, crying, dogs barking, doorbells ringing. If we waited for quiet to record, we probably would never publish an episode. So just bear with us on that, and if you enjoy that type of thing, enjoy the sounds of the Wagner household. The other thing, when you hear music on this podcast, it is either royalty-free or it's original music. We've highlighted Jessica Watson a few times in the past. She's our outro music today and also has been in the past. If you know anyone who would like to get some visibility for their original music, we'd love to talk to them. While getting music for our podcast, we also give the opportunity to highlight them and push people towards their work, towards their concerts, towards their outings, whatever it might be. So if you know anybody like that, contact us and you can send them our way. Lastly, Julie's going to use a word today that's not going to mean a whole lot to you probably. It's going to be a word called ligamenting. It actually comes from a podcast that we both listened to by Rob Bell. I'm going to link to that podcast in our show notes so you can get more context. But just know it kind of has to do with the ligaments in your body, kind of holding things together. Enjoy the show.
Welcome
To Celebrate
Story.
Welcome to Celebrate Story.
Meanderings in Motherhood. With my mom.
My mom.
It's my mom. With my mom.
With my wife.
Julie Wagner.
Julie Wagner.
A few weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, a neighbor who actually I met her in the beginning of the shutdown of coronavirus. It was one of those days where I was stirring for connection, stirring for communication. And so I got into this habit during COVID to linger long in my front yard and to find a conversation and to find a connection with a neighbor. My friend was walking by and I ended up striking up a conversation with her. First the stranger was walking by, then that became my friend. And I loved the conversation I had with her. It turned out she was a play therapist and I loved hearing about her work and her passion. And she seemed to love hearing about my passion for play and how that relates to home education and how just being human. So we just had such a fun connection over play that day. And I haven't really seen her much, but she's occasionally dropped in and checked on us and that kind of thing. But right before Thanksgiving, she texted me and said, our agency has a surplus of donations of stuffed animals. And I'm wondering if your children wouldn't want a few of these. And I was like, well, yeah, sure. How thoughtful. Yeah, I'd love that. So I kind of forgot all about it. And the next morning, my husband and I are sitting in our comfy chairs, which look out our front window. And I see this car pull up and a huge bag dropped by our mailbox. And my husband looks at me like, what? And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh no, because I'm in like operation, get rid of lots of things in this house. So this did not seem consistent with my operation. And all of a sudden it clicked. I was like, okay, yeah, it's my neighbor. She's dropping off these like extra stuffed animals that they couldn't use. They're for the kids, but I just never imagined it would be such a gigantic bag. And so we brought him in and there were so many stuffed animals all in one space. It immediately made me think of like claw machines. I have a love of the big giant claw machine. I mean, I probably thought entirely too much about this, but I love the mix of chance and chaos and also skill that is combined. It's like, I just love it. And I love that everybody, when someone's going for a toy, it's like this group celebration, this group connection of celebration, or the group disappointment. I've been known to spend what was like intended to be like $10 at Fuddruckers. Fuddruckers is starting to be a theme, isn't it? I've been known to like, okay, we're only spending $10 and then walking out like $40 later because I cannot resist the feeling of connection, of everyone's on the same page. Everyone's excited about the stuffed animal that the one person's winning, or everyone's devastated at the last moment when the little Clifford the Big Red Dog drops from the claw. So I absolutely love it. So in fact, actually, when all the machines were hitting Facebook Marketplace, I really had hoped I was going to score a gigantic human claw machine. Anyways, I digress. I needed you to understand how important this human claw machine is to me. And so I've dreamed before with my kids of why couldn't we just make something? I mean, we've got cardboard. My kids have owned several of those grabbers over the years. Like, surely it wouldn't be that hard to make a human claw machine. And I'm usually just like saying this in a way to like entice them and give them a seed and hope one of them run with it with their own imagination and work. But I wasn't able to get any of them to grab a hold of that vision. And I decided it probably wasn't, I probably couldn't devote a whole day to building a human claw machine. So I decided to, just let all my kids pick just out of the bag without the claw machine vision happening. And so one by one, they picked their favorite sloth or their favorite cat or their favorite dog. And they were the cutest stuffed animals, brand new stuffed animals. And it was like, still, there was so many stuffed animals left. So of course, little ones are being little ones and they're ready for their second stuffed animal. And I'm like, oh no, in this house, everyone gets first before anyone gets second. And so I was like, let's ask all the kids on the street to see if they want to come in and pick, which of course, undoubtedly it would have been much more fun if we had a human claw machine, but let's work with what we have here. And so they all came in and they were so cute because they were all so excited to pick their animal and so thankful. And it felt so fun to be a bridge of this gift that this neighbor gave us that then we could give to them. And it felt a little bit like a multiplication effect. It's like the more we gave away, it seemed like the more stuffed animals we had. And so then we're, not just giving them away to the kids on our street, but then we're thinking of the people we do swim team with that live on the other side of the neighborhood and taking the golf cart and sending one of the teenagers over to drop some of the stuffed animals off at their house and then another's front door. And it just became this like magical, playful, alive place. And it was so exciting. And as I reflected on it, like, why did that mean so much? Because then I loved even like circling back to the friend and showing her a picture of all the kids that were they were playing endless games, clutching these brand new stuffed animals. And I was like, why did that experience mean so much? Like, because see, I have another like interest and passion. Ever since I came across these things a few years ago, it's a needs wheel and a feelings wheel. And it's hard for me to articulate like why these are such important tools to me, but I'm going to give it a shot here in today's podcast. When I look at the needs wheel, I can see, okay, we all have a need for community and we all have a need for connection and we all have a need for creativity and we all have a need for meaning. And it's like, I can see very easily, okay, it was exciting and it was joyful because all these needs were so easily met. And I was able to be this, just this like recipient of this gift and then this bridge to pass it on. And it was just such a hands-on practical way to feel connected with my neighbors. Say happy,
Happy.
sad,
Tap.
mad.
I feel happy because my need of play is met.
I'm happy because my hangout spot is almost built and it's like a house. So I'm happy.
So a few years back, I came across the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Now, I have read this book 3 times, and I have referenced it countless times. I think the reason why is the most hopeful human part of me that longs for people to be connected and aches when I see discord and disagreement and fighting and name calling. Like, this to me provides a tool of compassion inwards to ourselves and a tool of compassion outwards to others. So the idea is it's very simple, but very difficult because it's very opposite of what we do in our culture. So the idea is, so Marshall Rosenberg, who wrote the book, grew up in Detroit. And when he moved into Detroit, the summer after he moved into Detroit, there was a huge race conflict that broke out that 40 people, 40 of his neighbors lost their lives. And it resulted in their whole family staying in their house for 3 days. And he started asking the question then as a young teen, what is it that makes people that I know lose touch with their compassionate nature? Fast forward to, 20 years, I think it approximately is. Don't quote me on that. He's working in a juvenile detention center. And 2 separate days, he got bumped, elbowed in the face while trying to break up a disagreement between 2 individuals. Both days, he got literally elbowed almost the exact same way. And one day, he felt an experience of intense rage and anger, and it's all he could do to not respond, not be retaliatory or revengeful in his thoughts and his actions. It was like just everything he could do to like hold it back. And then the second day, absolutely no anger, no feelings of revenge. And as he analyzed these 2 experiences, he analyzed that one of the students he had already labeled as a negative label in his mind. And the other student he'd already labeled as a positive in his mind. So even though it was the exact 2 almost identical scenarios, when he'd already had the label in his mind in a positive frame, there was absolutely no anger. And so his whole work, his whole book is laying out like a plea for compassionate communication. And he, before he died, he was an internationally known psychologist and peace worker and peace activist. And so he breaks it down to, what he says is that we all have things that are alive in us that are a need and a feeling, and they're human needs and feelings, and that often conflict comes in when we're trying to put those needs and those feelings out rather than looking in. And so he kind of walks you through in the book, like if you can identify what's happened, the actual events. So like talking from my beginning story, it's like, okay, had these extra stuffed animals, got to pass them out. And then I'm able to identify a need of community. And I can just literally find it right on the needs wheel. And then I can identify a feeling of joy. So that's easy to do when it's a positive experience. And it's really fun to be able to find it on the needs wheel, find it on the feeling wheel, and to say it with granularity. And it's a feeling of closeness. It's like to be able to share that with my husband or dear friends. It's like I can really fine tune with granularity the experience inside of me. So it's a way for me to share what's inside of me with you, and you can find that inside of you. And the more I've studied this needs wheel and this feelings wheel, and subsequently so many books about needs and feelings since, I am growing more and more convinced of the theory that at our core, any story, there is no story, no experience that you can share with me that I can't find that need and feeling inside of me. Because we are so obsessed with our tidy boxes of, okay, these are the good families, these are the bad families. But at the core, if you listen to anyone's story that has broken their heart, you can find in you a need and a feeling that is at the core of their actions, their needs and their feelings. And so where I find this more difficult, where this work feels weighty and quite a bit of just a burden, like how do you even do it? How do you even wade through all that comes is when it's those unpleasant emotional experiences. Mark Brackett has a cool grid that he's done through tons of research. I believe he's a Harvard professor. We'll link him in the show notes. He did a grid of emotions and he put them on unpleasant versus pleasant and high energy versus low energy. And in our culture, we do anything to avoid everything on the left side of that graph, all those unpleasant emotions. We do anything to deny, dismiss, or bypass those unpleasant experiences in the same way that Ernest Beckard calls it the denial of death. We do anything to avoid thinking about that. And the ironic part, there's so much light at embracing those.
I feel inadequate because my need for affirmation and worth are not met.
I meet my need for humor with sarcasm.
I feel alienated because my need for community is not met.
I feel sad because my need for value wasn't met.
I have a need for affirmation, and I feel disappointed when I don't get it.
I had my first meet on Friday, and I'm just afraid that I'm going to disappoint myself and my teammates.
My first spark of wonder and curiosity with this needs wheel and this feelings wheel is it was a space to be fair with what was alive inside of me and a space to hear what was alive in someone else. So there was a pretty devastating to me transition in my community about 4 years ago. And I thought what I was initially doing was, so one of my own personal passions is, if there's ever someone that's being shamed for an action they did, or I perceive they're being shamed, it's like, I hope I will always be the first to say, nope, we're not doing that. And that's just a core life value. There's a lot of things that have shifted in my life as I have just deconstructed and reconstructed my beliefs over the last several years, but that one remains true and steady. It's like, I don't want any part of jumping on a shame train. So what I thought I was doing was kind of like speaking up for that of like, nope, we're not going to shame this person. And very quickly, the whole thing unraveled into some just pretty devastating, broken relationships. And it was a reckoning for me, and I learned so much for it. And they were lessons that were painful, and I wouldn't trade for anything because they were lessons that got me more rooted into who I am and what my relationship is to others. So someone was so hurting in response to my only guess could be a lack of connection, a lack of closeness, and that they wanted more from me than I could give. And so they then proceeded to tell many people in our community some hurtful accusations that I was a bridge burner. And definitely came back and reported to me on my 40th birthday through an audio message that I was a bridge burner and that she had a nameless, faceless army that was behind her. This was nothing short of devastating for me because I went, a big part of what I had ligamented myself to was this part of my ego that loves being a connector, loves being in touch with others, loves being a part of a community, loves being someone who connects to friends. And so I'm grateful that happened in a hard sort of grateful way because I got to dig deep and decide who gets to decide whether I'm a bridge builder or a bridge connector, because I think a lot of people in certain personality types would just shrug that off and be like, whatever. But for me, someone who's like so wide open and so open-hearted, I think the flip side of that is if I'm open-hearted to your love, I am open-hearted to your criticism. And the needs wheel and the feelings wheel help me listen to myself in what I needed and help me listen to her and what she needed. And it helped me have the most compassionate lens for what she was doing and the most compassionate lens to what I was experiencing. Because I think at that time, I also deconstructed a lot of the false the lies that I held on to that a good Christian woman should not be angry and a good Christian woman should forgive quickly. And it's like in our culture, we just want these messy things to be done over with fast and quickly. And we don't want to deal with it because it's a mess. And so it's like, I wanted it to be over and I wanted it to be over fast. And so I think that's the heart of why it means so much to me to be able to see, okay, that that was a feeling that whole experience erupted a volcano of shame inside of me, because I have a need for connection and a need to be seen and known in my community, and a need to be connected. And that threatened all those needs. So then all of a sudden it starts to make sense. And I think it's interesting then using needs and feelings wheels in arguments. Everywhere you look, right? The last few years, there's arguments in healthcare and politics and churches. And it's like, I have this like naive hope that if we could all get better about what's knowing like inside of us, like what's actually going on, what actual need we have and what actual feeling we have when we're in these spaces, and then listening for what need and feeling the other person has, like it literally gives me hope in such a way that I cannot quite articulate, because it's universal. It's universal to have feelings of jealousy and boredom and scorn and suspicion and concern and hesitancy and hopelessness. Like if you're human, if your heart is beating, you have experienced those places. But we don't talk about any of those unpleasant emotions. And it's like, if we don't talk about it, and if we don't even have a vocabulary for the granularity of differences of our needs between a need for admiration or a need for accomplishment or a need for presence or a need for patience or a need for curiosity and learning and growth, if we can't talk about it with such granularity, then how will we ever get those needs met? And how will we ever experience the intimacy? Because so many writers in every field are talking about this age of isolation and this age of loneliness. But it's like, if we don't even know ourselves and can articulate what is alive in us without hurting someone else, we're doomed to disconnection. I went on a walk with a friend this morning, and it's one of those friends that it starts and you think that 15 minutes have passed and 2 hours actually passed. And she was talking about a book she read. And when I get the name of the book, I'll also add that to the show notes. And it was so interesting because she was talking about this idea that like we are hardwired for a sense of belonging. We are hardwired, like our very brains and our bodies, like we want belonging so bad. And we were talking about this idea that how we ligament ourselves to ideas and systems. And it's like we just accept that none of those are perfect, but we all want to memorize all these perfectly ordered rules on this system. And that there's like such a threat if a member of that group doesn't agree with all those tenets. But it's like if we could all just go deeper, that we're not connected because we have the same ideology. We're not connected because we have the same political party. We're not connected because we're in the same neighborhood. We're not connected because we have voted for the same person. We are connected because we are all just walking each other home. We all at our core have the exact same needs and the exact same feelings.
And we'll be right back.
Y'all, I'm so excited. I just found a meaningful and beautiful gift for my mom. These beautiful bird ornaments that I could have sent to her home. And I love that Noonday Collection offers all kinds of meaningful, well-made gifts, and that they're a part of the fair trade movement. So when you are supporting Noonday Collection, you are supporting women around the globe to empower them, to give them dignity in their work. And so I just love that. So once again, the Noonday Collection is the sponsor of this week's podcast, and they can solve all your last-minute gifting dilemmas. So you can shop e-gift cards for instant delivery. So you could literally buy this on Christmas Day and be able to offer a personal, meaningful gift that matters, that the person can select exactly what they want. So shop the link in our show notes to shop Noonday Collection and support Celebrate Story podcast and women around the world.
Now back to Celebrate Story.
There's a song by Wailing Jennies called One Voice, and we'll link it in the show notes. And I've listened to that song probably 100 times. And it becomes a prayer, a meditation, a hope, a wish, a dream. because I think thinking about this in terms of listening for needs and feelings just gives me this just great awareness of how far off I am. Because my gut, I'm a product of American culture. My gut is to, evaluate, to be in the judgment seat and to decide who is good, who is bad, who is right, who is wrong, who is dangerous, who is safe. And judgments aren't all bad, but it's like how much pain and violence is done from name calling rather than calling a name to what is inside of me without ever hurting you. That's a huge ask. When I first rolled into this needs and feelings wheel stuff, I made a copy because they're really colorful wheels for every person I knew and loved of a needs wheel and a feelings wheel. And my kids listened and, we talked about it and I had some of the younger ones color it in, even gave like my son's girlfriend a need and feeling wheel. And she was very excited about it, very interested. And I'll never forget the moment that just was like the first breath of encouragement of like, not to give up, no matter how hard it is that there was two of my sons were having a disagreement. I've got permission to share this story about something that was going on in the room. And they were trying to discuss it. And of course, these things are difficult. Like in this house, everyone shares a room. When you got 10 people in a house, everyone shares a room. What opportunities for growth. And so I'll never forget the older son of the two in the room said, "Where's that needs and feelings wheel? You know what? I've got a need for peace and I'm angry when," and it was just such a moment. I mean, it became funny and it became something we laughed at, but I'm like, wow, it's a cry of my heart because it's like a conflict that has been heavy on my heart and my head is one of two local pastors. I don't even think they have a conflict with each other, but they've both been loud and vocal about their position and equating it to God's position in this whole debate. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because I'm like, wow, how much different could I hear your message if I could just keep interpreting, okay, you have a need for security and you are so afraid if your people don't do this that you can't trust that they're all safe. Okay, and you, this other pastor, you have a need for freedom and you are so afraid if your position doesn't get, locked in as God's, then you feel like that freedom is threatened. It's like all of a sudden, if we can connect, if we can go deeper and get vulnerable enough to find what is alive inside of us without hurting the other person, I think it can transform every single relationship and entire communities. But it's so far from the way we're used to talking. We're used to, oh, he's a jerk. He's dangerous. Oh, she's such a great person. It's so hard to build a vocabulary of, wow, you know what? Her need for curiosity that she follows, it really just brings up a spirit of aliveness in me when she's so curious. Because then with granularity, I'm sharing how I'm experiencing her rather than evaluating that she is good or she is bad. Because what is that? And who are we to decide those things? This podcast for my husband and I has been such a place of life-giving communication between the two of us. And it also has been hard. I mean, there is like a struggle of shame that I don't think I'll ever be done with on this side of heaven. Because it's like as soon as the excitement of one fades, the stories in my head go like this. Who are you to say anything? What do you have to say? You don't have anything important to say to anyone. It's like the voices are relentless. And just every time I identify, okay, there it is. That's the shame voice. It's like it comes back in a different costume. But I know every time I do it, it meets a need for me to place my passion. And it meets a need for me to use my strengths and to have a community built with sharing and receiving stories. One listener that has been so enthusiastic and so warm, I just absolutely love her detailed feedback that she continues to give. We were talking about vulnerability in a Marco Polo, and we were talking about the difference between, true vulnerability and this like curated vulnerability. And this just like sent my curiosity side of my brain just full of aliveness. Like, okay, this is interesting. What's the difference? Because it's like there's such a high value in me of wanting to be vulnerable, because I think we're all just walking each other's home. There is nothing in me at its core that is not also in you. I'm not saying there's not differences. I'm just saying the core needs and feelings, they are the same. I might have a higher need. Like I have a higher need for connection. I need like 1,000 connections in 1 week. And, someone like my husband might need 4. So we have different levels of that. I'm not saying we're all need that to the same degree, but I have such a need for connection, and this podcast beats that. And I just loved hearing her feedback, because I was talking, I was like, I just don't want to, there's a place and a time and a space to share the right things with the right group of people. And I tend to accidentally overshare at times. And it's a journey that I am working on. And I was kind of talking about that. I was like, oh yeah, I just have anxiety. Like I don't want curated vulnerability. I want real vulnerability. And she, not knowing anything about the previous story, she said, Julie, your vulnerability builds connection and community. She did not know it, but those words, the granularity of her appreciation with specific words, she had no idea what a space of healing that was, because that's my heart. That's my heart. That's what I love to do. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this podcast gives just a seed of information to help you better identify what is alive inside of you as far as your needs and your feelings. And also so you can listen to what is alive in someone else that you love for their needs and feelings. Here's a perfect example story to end with. Is the other week. So we went through this massive cookie baking situation in my house. So I love to set my kids free in the kitchen, because I love, a recovering codependent, I can feel their excitement. I can feel their delight in having total and full control. And I can feel that they have this need for autonomy and control. And it's met by them being able to just take over my kitchen. And it comes at a cost. I mean, sometimes I doubt this strategy when I'm wiping up honey and flour in the bottom of my spice cabinet and I can't even spin it because there's so much thick honey, or when the mayonnaise gets stuck back in the pantry. But nonetheless, that the value of giving them that feeling of autonomy and control. And I mean, I don't even have to mention all the math that's involved in like you're doubling this recipe and tripling this recipe. Well, anyway, so they all got to pick, whoever wanted to do it, their batch of cookies that they were going to make for baking cookies. We spent 3 days making the list, getting the stuff on the list. I've lost count of how many grocery trips we did. We like seriously live at the grocery store. No matter how hard I plan, it's like, I always got to go again. And so we spent 3 days making these lists, still had to go one additional time that morning, but we finally had all the ingredients that 4 of my kids needed to make their set of cookies. And at first I was going to pair one of my kids with an older one of the younger ones that was cooking with an older one. I'm like, this will just work better. And all of a sudden he was so upset, just crying and fighting over it. And it's like, this needs and feelings wheel gives me the vocabulary to understand. Like, just because he wasn't at a reading level yet didn't mean he didn't want the autonomy to do his own recipe and the esteem, the worth, the validation to have his own recipe. And he never ever used those words, but I felt that as I felt what he was feeling. And it's like, okay, let me set you up. Here's a YouTube video. You're going to watch how to make these peanut butter blossoms. You're going to watch it. Oh no, I can't memorize it. Nope. You don't have to memorize it. Just watch it. And you're really great at math because he's this really well. In math, it comes easier. Some things come easier to us. Some things come harder. And reading has come harder for him. And I was like, all you have to do, you'll just see the numbers. Once you've watched the video, you can do it. The whole thing turned around. Now, for every one moment I've done that, I probably can remember so many moments that I missed the mark because I'm continually working on integrating the acceptance that I have beautiful moments like that. And I have moments I miss the mark. But I thought that was a great ending story. Just the power of just having the vocabulary of all the different needs we have of beauty, humor, delight, celebration, gratitude, presence, patience, learning, growth, skill, loyalty, reliability, variety, challenge, opportunity, exploration, discovery, vivacity, nourishment, nutrition, comfort, relief, healing. Those are only a few of the needs. And then all the feelings that we have. There's a whole section of that wheel that's like feelings when your needs are not met, of uninterested, bored, sickened, nauseous, suspicious, insecure, anxious, vulnerable, astonished, distracted, startled, depressed, hopeless, despondent, anguish, despair, heartbroken, devastated, regretful, remorseful. How will we ever get the support we need and want and so desperately long for if we don't even have the vocabulary? Our limit of our language on our needs and feelings limits our intimacy. And by growing our vocabulary on our human needs and feelings, it grows our connection and our compassion and our community.
You taste the tears, you're lost in sorrow. You see your yesterdays, but I see tomorrow. You see the darkness, but I see the spark. You know